and welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Grants for Artists for fiscal year 2023, which for us runs from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. I am Carolyn Koska. I am the Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And I'll just start out and run down what we're going to talk about today. I'll talk just briefly about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMAC. We'll look at the guidelines for these grant programs that we have available. We'll go over to our website and look through what the resources we have available for you there. Then we'll head into our grant system and walk through one of the applications. And we'll finish up talking about the grant process, or what happens after you submit an application. So I will stop a couple times for questions here. Feel free to note those down as they come up for you, or type them in the chat. And we can unmute everybody at those times to get some questions answered. And then at the end, if you'd like to talk more about a specific project that you have in mind, we can do that too. So the Southwest Minnesota Arts Council is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. So here's our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. And our funding comes mostly from the state of Minnesota. We have an allocation from their general fund, but the most of it comes from the Arts and Cultural Heritage, or Legacy Fund. We also get funding from the McKnight Foundation, which we will be using for a lot of the grants that we're talking about today, and also from memberships and donations from around our region. So the grants that we are going to talk about today, there are 4 programs that we're going to talk about, and we'll start with these 3 first that are open to artists who are at any stage of their career. So from beginning up to very advanced can apply under these grant programs. The first one is Quick Support for Artists, and that is a smaller amount of money that's available a little more readily. It has a monthly deadline, so as an opportunity comes up, you can apply for some funding. Then we have our Artist Growth Grant, and this is new for us this year. And this is probably the one that most will apply under for a normal project that we're doing, and we'll talk about what that might look like in a little bit. Then we have our Artist Equity Grant Program, and that one is basically the same as the Artist Growth Grant, except it is limited to BIPOC artists only, so artists who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. So those are our 3 that are open to artists at any career stage. Then we have one, which is also new for us this year, our Advanced Artist Fellowship. And this is only open to established advanced artists. So we're looking for really high creative excellence, that they have produced a substantial body of work over time, and have received significant recognition for their work. And these, we are only awarding 2 of these per year, so I'm guessing it will be very competitive. And as we go forward, I'm going to just kind of talk about all these programs together, because aside from sort of who can apply, and dollar amounts and deadline frequency, other than that, they're really all the same, and they have the same kinds of activities that you can do with them. So for all of these, the applicant needs to live within the 18 counties of our service region, And in case you couldn't read on the tiny map earlier, those include Big Stone, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine, or on tribal lands within our service area. And we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. So along with being in the region, we want you to be a resident here for at least 6 months before applying, and you need to remain a resident throughout your grant project. You also need to be at least 18 years old by the time you would get around to signing a grant contract. For artists under 18, they should check out our Art Study Opportunity for Youth grants. And all arts disciplines are accepted for these grant programs. Now we'll talk about what kinds of things you could apply for under all of these grants. So it could be that you want to focus on creating new work. So you may ask for funding for supplies or equipment that you need. Maybe you need to rent some studio space. Maybe you need some funds for research. You can pay yourself for your time to work on your artwork. Or if you need childcare in order to enable you to do that, it can cover those costs as well. Maybe you're more looking at sharing your work. So those kinds of activities could include framing, recording, getting your work edited, putting together a portfolio or website. Or maybe you are more interested right now in some artistic or professional development. And that could include things like attending classes or workshops, doing a one-on-one study with a mentor, or going to a conference related to your art. And for all of these, it's not like you have to choose one area for your project. You can pull things from these different areas. And then one thing that is different is in our quick support grant, applicants also have the option to do a small community project instead of something just for their own development. So the grant amounts for these four that we just talked about, quick support for artists, you can request up to $1,000. For artist growth and artist equity, you can request up to $4,000. And then that advanced artist fellowship up to $7,000. Then we are just going to talk about a few things that we cannot fund. So all of these that we're going to talk about are not eligible for these grants. Obviously, projects that don't have an art focus, activities of a for-profit business, equipment requests that are not specifically tied to the project that you're doing right now, credits or materials necessary to fulfill degree requirements for students. College students are eligible to apply, but their project would need to be totally separate from what they are doing for school. We also can't fund applications that are mostly about you as a teacher. So not anything developing curriculum plans or teaching materials. We really want you to focus on yourself as an artist here. We can't fund requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate. We can fund things like some work needing to be done on your studio space, but not building a totally new studio space or purchasing that. Also, for quick support only, we can't fund activities that take place outside of Minnesota. We are using state funds for that one, and that is a rule related to that money. And again, that is just the quick support grant. We can't fund activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins. So you can't have already bought stuff or registered for a class and then apply for a grant to cover those costs. Or if you still have a past grant project still in progress or a late final report. So with our artist grants, you can only have one grant going at a time. You need to fully finish up one before applying again, and you can only have one application in at a time, one application pending. You'll need to have a start date for your project. On our materials, you'll notice that our different deadline rounds have an earliest start date listed, and you can't start any of your activities or spend any of your funds before the start date. So you'll want to make sure to check for that and make sure it lines up with your project. So activities that you could not do before your start date would be buying any supplies. You couldn't put down a down payment toward a workshop that you were going to know marketing of any kind before that start date. If you do have something that you do just really need to spend those funds before that date, like I said, if you put a down payment towards a workshop, for instance, then you can't include that amount in your budget. You could only include the remaining amount. You'll also need to choose an end date for your project and make sure to give yourself plenty of time. Usually I advise people to just choose the furthest out date that they can, just to give plenty of time in case things happen. That's easier to do than extending out your project. So projects that are awarded this year need to be finished up by June 30th of 2024. So that is, if you wanted to, you could put that as your end date. And then if you got done earlier, you could go ahead and complete your report early. That's fine. So dates to be aware of for both the quick support and the artist equity grants. Those have ongoing deadlines the first of each month, starting in August and running through May if we have funding remaining through that whole time. And then the earliest date you could start your project would be the first day of the next month. So if you applied at the August 1st deadline, then you would be able to start your project as early as September 1st. And for the quick support, I just want to point out that the quick has to do with the process of applying and being awarded a grant, not with how quickly you need to do your project. So you still have as much time as anyone else to do your project. It's just a lot faster to get a grant and get going. Then for our artist growth grants, we have 2 rounds this year for these. The first deadline is August 17th for projects starting October 1st or later. And round 2 deadline is January 11th for projects starting March 1st or later. And you'll see on all of these, there's a reminder to submit by 4:30 p.m. That's the time that's set on each of those deadlines. So make sure to be aware of that as you're working on your application. And then the Advanced Artist Fellowship, we are just having 1 round of that, deadline October 19th for projects starting December 1st or later. And again, this is the one that we're only able to award 2 applicants. And we can stop now here for some questions if you've got some so far. So feel free to either unmute yourself and ask your question or type something into the chat.
We can duplicate all these things that, I mean, all the what's the word? All the things that you're putting up on the screen, we can get copies of by printing them off. Is that right?
These should all be in the guidelines for the grants, and then just after this, we'll take a look at where you can find those. Also, we are recording today, and that'll be posted and available.
Very good.
Have that ready.
All right, thank you.
All right, not hearing any other questions or seeing anything in the chat, we are going to move on. Head over to, so here's our website, and I'll just point out a few things as we go through here. So the easiest place to get to our grant system where you need to go to apply is if you scroll down beneath these slides here, there's this black grants box and a login button right there. So that'll be your fastest way to get to the grant system. Then I'm just going to take you over to this workshops and assistance page for a second. This just is a reminder of all the ways you can get some help if you have questions about an application or project. We have some Q&A sessions planned. We recently did some in-person ones around the region and have a few virtual Q&A sessions planned over the course of the rest of the year. You can talk to me about any questions you may have, and there's a link to schedule some time with me there if you'd like. And then we just have a list of all of the grant workshops that we have for our grant programs. And if they haven't happened yet, you'll see it's got a link to register, or like this one that already happened, we have the recording available. So this is just a spot to remind yourself of what's available for workshops or other assistance. But now we're going to head over to our grants for individual artists. And we'll take a look at the artist growth grants right now. So on each page, for each grant program, they'll all be similarly set up. So it starts out, it's got the materials for this year. So here are the guidelines. That's probably your most important thing to look at here. And we have the application questions in a Word document. Some people like to work in that first and then paste their answers into the grant system later, or you can just scan through and take a look at what the questions are. We've got a budget form here. You can read through the criteria that the review panel will be using to score your application, get an idea of what they're looking for. And we even have the final report questions available if you want to look ahead and see what might be involved in that. Then we've got all of the important dates here. And here's where we'll post the recording of today's webinar also. We are able to review a draft of your application. I'll talk more about that later, but the deadline for that for this first round is August 3rd. There's the application deadline again, the dates when both the panel and then the board will be considering your applications, and then the earliest project start date. So that's listed for each round. And then we've just got some information about some alternative ways to apply and a video tutorial for our grant system, which we are going to head over to. And I just realized this page should have a button for going over to that grant system, and I don't see it, but we're going to get there a different way. I know this one, I think with that artist growth being new, we must have missed that, but all of the pages here do have this apply now button that will take you to the login. So we'll head over there. So here's our logon page. If you already have an account in here, you could go ahead and just sign in. If you're totally new, you could create a new account, but we do have, it sometimes happen that people are not sure if they already have an account, or maybe have something through an organization or school that they already work with. So if you're not sure about that, you can just contact us and we can get that figured out for you. So we're gonna just log in here. Just one thing to be aware of, if you have ever been a panelist for us, it actually brings you to that dashboard first. So you'll need to check and make sure you are under your applicant dashboard. So here that is. So this is where when you log in, you would come to when you're kind of returning to the system, but when you come in for the very first time, it'll take you right away to this apply page. And this lists all of the grants that we have currently available. So you just scroll through and find the one that you need. We have things for organizations listed first, and also be aware we do have a quick support for organizations. So make sure that you find the right one if you're planning to do, here's the quick support for artists. But we're going to take a look at the artist growth application. You can either click this preview button to take a look at it without actually starting anything, but we're going to hit apply. And a couple of buttons to be aware of as we dive into our application. Up here, if you do, we have Google Translate embedded into the site. So if you need to work in a different language, you can select that there, and it will translate the interface and questions for you, and you can work in that language. We have a copy previous answers button. If you have done an application in the system before, you can choose to copy from that, and it'll copy over answers between any questions that are the same between those two applications. So you could have applied under a different program in the past, but still copy some of those answers over. Then we have a collaborate button. You can invite somebody to work on the application with you. In order to do that, you would just enter their email address, choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and then just send them a little message, whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Maybe you are just wanting somebody to read through and proof your application for you. Maybe you're working with an artist mentor, and they could come in and add some samples of their own work directly into the application. So once you invite them here, they'll receive an email, and they'll just need to create a password to come in here and take a look at your application. All right, we've got right at the top here a reminder of what to do if you have some questions or need some help. You can follow this link. It'll let you choose a time on my calendar, either by phone or Zoom or in person. And here's my email address as well. You can email questions to me. You'll need a name for your project. Does not need to be anything fancy, just something that describes a little bit what you're going to be doing. You would enter the amount you're requesting here. You'll probably want to wait until after you've done your budget form to do that, just to make sure. If you'd like to share your preferred pronouns, you can do so here. This is mostly for returning applicants, but we ask if the contact information up here is correct, or if you need to enter separate contact information for yourself. This may happen if you also do applications for a school, and you might have the school information up here, and we want to make sure that we're able to reach you directly. We've got some links again to the guidelines and the scoring criteria, if you want to check those out again. We have the Word document with the application questions here, if you'd like to use those. Then I'll also just point out the character limit for these fields is really large, and we're not expecting you to use up all of those characters. We want to make sure you have plenty of room in case you have a lot to say about one of the questions, but no need to feel like you need to fill up that whole box. So the first question you're going to be answering is to describe your project. If it is going to involve producing some new work, we ask you what and how much do you hope to produce? Not that you have to have an exact number of pieces, but just so we know kind of the scope of what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to come up with 5 or 20. And then what is your artistic vision for that work that you are planning to make? Or if your project has some sort of study opportunity involved, you can describe that here along with some qualifications for the teacher. And then we ask for you to just outline your timeline for the project. This next little section of supplemental materials is optional. You may have things that you want to provide some extra information about if there's some more information about a conference that you're going to, if you want to provide your mentor's resume and a couple samples of their work, if you want to provide some more detailed specs about a particular piece of equipment you want to buy, or if you want to explain something about a medium or a technique that might not be so familiar to everyone. So you've just got a few fields of both uploading or links to provide any of that optional supplemental material. Here's where you will enter in your start and end dates for the project, and it does remind you about our guidelines for those for this year. Then you have your budget form. We've got an Excel form here for you to fill out. You can either use this or you can make your own budget, but we'll take a look at the Excel one here. All right, so here's our budget form. You can either put a name or your project title up here, and then you can just list what are the costs that you're going to have. So you can type into there, and we'll throw some amounts in here. And you'll see it is adding up for you. And then this is kind of a double check to help you figure out how much you can request. And it reminds you that your request cannot exceed your cash costs, which here it's pulling that total of $1,540 or the maximum request amount for this grant program. And here's artist growth, 4,000, whichever is less. So our $1,540 is less. That's how much we could request here. But let's say we have a more expensive project. Let's see. So now our cost is $5,540. So now the artist growth max is less, $4,000. And then here, if your cost is more than the amount you can request, you can explain here where that extra money is coming from. So whether that's coming from just your personal funds or elsewhere, you can list that there. So you would fill out and save this budget form and upload that here. Then we have the budget narrative field, and here you can kind of have more details about particular supplies or equipment, or how you came up with your calculation for how much you are paying yourself for your time. Things like that can go in that budget narrative. So the next section is going to look at your work. So you're asked to either upload your artist resume or describe your experience here, including the kinds of information that would normally go in an artist resume. If you work in folk or traditional art, we ask you to talk about your connection to the cultural community that your art form comes from. You can put in your website here, and then we ask for samples of your work. And we've got some parameters here depending on whether you have written materials, images, audio, or video, along with some links if you are trying to resize something or combine files. But we've got a whole bunch of upload fields here with a place to put a description of what you are attaching. And then down here, we've got a bunch of fields for links if you are linking to videos, etc. And you can describe what is in those links here. And then next, we're looking at your goals and how this is contributing to your growth as an artist. So it asks you to think about what artistic needs this project is meeting for you. How is it going to contribute to your growth as an artist? And as you're thinking about that, what specific changes are you hoping for? So you might think about what changes there could be related to your skills, your knowledge, your attitude, your behavior. So we're looking for you to come up with specific areas of growth. And then how would you plan to measure or prove that those changes have taken place? And it gives you some examples there. You could plan to get some feedback from others, compare your newer work to your older work. Maybe you want to use a journal to document your progress. So you just need to think a little bit about how this will be helping you grow as an artist. And we're just collecting a little data here, some demographic data, and then some audience numbers. And we at least need you to have one artist participating in the project, that is yourself. If your project does not really involve an audience, that's fine to put zeros here. But if you are planning to share your work in some way, you can estimate how many might see it. And then just a signature here at the bottom. So you can either click this Save Application button or submit when you're ready. We're going to click Save at the moment. The application will be auto-saving as you are working on it, but if you do hit that Save button, it'll give you this list of what questions you still need to answer. Right now, we haven't done anything, so they're all here, but that can help you kind of track your progress. So if you want to go back and keep working, you would hit continue, but we're going to go back over to the dashboard. And you'll see now here is this application that we just started for artist growth. if you want to go back and continue working, you can click the edit application link there. And this will be the same place if you are awarded a grant, where you'll come back later to fill out a contract and your final report. So that is what is all within our grant system. And we can stop now for another second or two for any questions that you have at this point.
Is there a requirement to have a show if you receive a grant, artist grant?
No, you are not required to do anything. It can help in your sort of feedback process and help in your final reporting, just to have something that happened. But no, you are not required to share your work in any way. So your entire grant project could be, I am attending this workshop.
Hi, I would like to know, it says here that the grant will give up to $4,000. Is this the maximum that we can include in the budget, or we can put more depending on what we want to do? If it's, for example, for a tour or an album, how does it work?
Yes, your entire project expenses can be more than the amount. You'll just have to show where that other funding is coming from.
Okay, but the maximum that that we can get awarded is $4,000?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's continue on, and then we can chat a little more when we have got through all of this information here. So here are just some tips as you are working on an application. It really helps to think ahead to make sure you're choosing the best round for your project, like for those monthly quick support or artist equity grants, or we've got the 2 rounds for the artist growth grants. So think about those earliest start dates to see what really works best for your project. Make sure you read the guidelines and the criteria. We don't want you to put together an entire application and then discover there was something ineligible from not reading the guidelines. So please make sure to look at that. Give yourself plenty of time, just in case, you know, maybe you are waiting on somebody to get you some information that you need, or just to make sure you have time to ask questions that might come up. So start working on it earlier than you think you need to. Also make sure to read and answer the questions fully. You would have seen in the application that most of them had multiple parts to the question. So just make sure that you are covering all of those. Like I mentioned before, no need to feel like you need to fill up those text boxes. Just make sure you are fully answering the question, just some clear and concise wording, and no need to feel like you need to use any special grant writing language. Just everyday language is fine to write these. It's also good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about you or your project. Sometimes people might talk about, well, this is a departure from my normal artwork, but keep in mind that people may not know what your normal artwork is. And finally here, don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. So there are several ways to do that. If you'd like to kind of talk through your project before you're even getting started, make sure you're applying under the right program, that your activities are eligible. So that can be really helpful to do that just to start out. Again, you can get answers for any questions you might have as you're filling out the application. And also we can review a draft of your application for you before you submit it. You would have seen on that list of dates on the page for each grant program that it listed a deadline to request that draft review. So be aware of that, but we can take a look at your application and make sure you're not missing anything. See if there's anything that we think the panel might find confusing that you can come back and adjust a little bit. So that can be really helpful as well. Just pay attention to the deadline for that. We can't guarantee that we're able to take a look after that deadline. So what happens after you submit your application? The first thing is that we, as staff, review it for eligibility and completeness, just make sure everything is there. If we find an issue at that point, you'll have 48 hours to fix whatever that is. And that's our kind of last contact with your application as staff. We don't have any say over who gets funded or not. We just are here to help facilitate that process for you. So from there, the whole round of applications will go on to a panel of individuals from around our region who have expertise in the necessary areas. And they will discuss and score the applications based on the criteria for the program, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the recommendations from the panel go on to our board, who makes the final funding decisions. So just looking at some of the criteria for quick support, the impact of the project is worth about 60% of your score, and then your ability to accomplish the project is worth about 40%. And for all of these, make sure to take a look at the criteria sheets that you saw posted a couple places here. They go into much more detail about each of these bullet points here. Then artist growth and artist equity have exactly the same criteria. They look at the excellence of your work, worth 45%. They look at the project's contribution to your growth as an artist, also 45%, and then 10% worth of feasibility of the project. And then the Advanced Artist Fellowship has the same criteria, but the percentages are a little different. You'll see the excellence of work is worth a lot more of your score, just because we just have so much higher expectations for this really competitive program. So after the panel scores these, you have the opportunity to earn a couple more percentage points if you meet any of these following criteria. If you are a first-time applicant to us, if you are from the BIPOC or LGBTQ communities, or are a person with disabilities, or if you're from one of our counties that has not received as much funding from us in the last year. So you have a chance to earn up to 3 percentage points here. So those are added onto your score before they go to the board. For all except for the artist equity grant, that does not have any extra points added because it's already set aside just for BIPOC applicants. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to do a contract. And we took a look at where you could find that in the grant system. And this is a big change for us this year. Forever, we had been giving out 80% of the grant award at the beginning of the project and 20% after you had done your final report. This year, we are changing that, and we will be giving out the full award at the beginning of your project. You will need to acknowledge the funding on any publicity or marketing things that you have. There'll be a credit line included in your grant contract that you'll need to use. And you may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on the source of your funds that were awarded to you. But we will send you all this information so you don't have to worry about getting the right information on your materials. One thing to just be aware of, we know that things happen as you are working on your projects. So if something comes up, some health issue or some piece of equipment that you were going to buy is no longer available, just contact us, and we could do things like extend your project date, approve some changes to your budget to get another thing that's kind of in the same spirit of your original request. So don't worry if something changes, and we just send us an email and we can work something out with you. You'll need to do a final report, which will be due 60 days after your project end date. And it's, like I said before, it's good to take a look at that ahead of time just to know what kinds of things to pay attention to during your project, like keeping track of your receipts. And that is all I have today. I can answer some more questions here, or if there's a specific project you'd like to talk about. Well, if there are no other questions, I'll just say thanks for joining us, and we hope to hear from you.